Okay, so we were in the derived functors, and this we had defined that the tensor product, you have this covariant functor, and this was the definition of Tor as a as a homology module. Okay, where M star was a projective resolution that you have started with, and the discussion was what we have done so far is that once you have used a projective resolution, then you have to show that this definition is independent of the projective resolution you choose. That means it is well defined. That has been done here. That no, not here. Just a minute. Uh, here, I believe. Uh, yeah, this is the problem with. No, that we had discussed before, that if you take two projective resolutions, if you have the functor and then we showed the equivalence. So that is how we proved that this definition of Tor is independent of the projective resolution of you choose. But if you remember in the last tutorial, there was a discussion on taking a flat resolution and do it. Okay, and I said that, but this requires a proof. It is not automatic because you require the projective resolution to define this derived functor. And then if you want to replace it by some homological resolution, then you have to show that you still have the equivalence, or you still have the isomorphism of the homologies. Okay, so you will see another such instance today. So I will come to that. Give me a minute. So anyway, so this is a very important. So this first long exact Tor sequence is what, if you remember. So if we apply this, if you start with a short exact sequence and then you tensor it with E, then you know the kernels are basically these are what you would be getting because of the non-left exactness of the tensor product. And this whenever you have here, the major part is that since these are all homology modules, so basically you need to connect this kernel co-kernel. That means snake lemma is used. Okay. Now here there is a very important comment that it can be seen as a functor in M and E both, and it is a bifunctor in the category of R modules. So basically here again a checking is required, that if you start with a projective resolution of M and then take this Tor as a homology module, instead if you start with a projective resolution of E and then take this Tor as an homology, as the nth homology, the nth Tor, then obviously you'd like to know whether they are the same, right? So again, this also requires a proof. And now here was the proposition that again, the proof follows from what we have done. Basically, what is that? We will be taking two projective resolutions, and first we show that projective resolutions, if we take, then we will be able to show that they are homotopic, and then homotopy finally, and then we apply the functor, we still have the homotopy, and then homotopy gives me the maps, equality of maps at the level of homologies, and that is how you actually show that it is independent of the projective resolution of choose. But again, if you do it with respect to any argument, then also you can do it. So that also basically, this is the proposition actually, that if you start with M star and E star are two projective resolutions of M and E, then the canonical complex homomorphisms, this and this, induce canonical isomorphism at the level of homology. Okay. Now, this proposition, since you are dealing with two simultaneously, I said that it requires a construction of a double complex. Now, you see, this one is kind of, one feels tempted to kind of do some hand waving and say it can be done. But it is also true that whenever you are running this kind of argument, there's a huge chance that you might go wrong. So therefore, we should at least discuss the major steps, and then you will be able to see that how to go about it. Okay. So construction of a double complex, I said that if you have two complexes satisfying that, so it is basically just the positive parts are there, supported at the positive parts, the negative we are assuming 0. And then this is how you can actually construct the complex. So you have this thread, okay, and then here you tensor by E0, thread M1, and tensor by E1, and so on. And in these levels also you have these maps, okay. So now, and what are these? These are the threads of E's, okay? These E star, and you are tensoring by each Mi, okay? So now, what did I say? I said that when you are defining these maps, you have to be careful, the boundary maps, because you want a complete commutativity of these squares and things like that. And this was the definition, that in order to have that successive maps commute, when you compose, you get 0. So you have to take care of this sign. So this is the way you basically define that at the row with index p, it differs by a sign p. Okay, you will see a similar thing today when we talk about injective resolutions and next. You will see a similar thing, only difference is it will be with respect to the cochain complexes. Okay, so it will be just the dual picture of this. Okay, so and therefore you will have these are some small verifications. You please do it, that you will be able to show that you have this D circle D is 0. And then what I said is that they induce any complex homomorphism from this to this, induce canonical complex homomorphisms at this level. And then we had this corollary that the Tor functors can be interpreted as left-derived functors of the tensor product, regardless of whether you are doing it from the right or from the left. But how does one finally prove this? How does one finally prove this? This is not so trivial, okay? So just saying that I use the double complex is not enough. So let us quickly go through the main steps of the proof, okay? This is going to be the corollary. This is called the second long exact Tor sequence. And you know, this is the, so once with respect to M, another is with respect to N. So these are the two long exact Tor sequences. That's it. Once you have taken a short exact sequence of these M's and then apply tensor with respect to N and then take the long exact sequence, the other one is with respect to the second one and tensor by the first one, etc. Okay, so now the proof. So the proof is a very serious diagram chasing, okay, and rather tedious. So you have the complex homomorphism from here to here. You understand this is sort of the double complex, okay, and then here you have this. So here you have the bottom row. This is the bottom row, okay, fine. So this is the bottom row, this one, what you see out here. And then here you have the double complex. Here you have the double complex, which is this. Okay, now you have the maps. If you remember, just sort of remember this much. Remember this much. It is it's all right, but just remember that you will be basically adding D dash and D double dash, but with a sign at the pth row. So therefore, odd and even, it will be either plus or minus. I mean, or rather minus or plus. So okay, so that's what you have to just remember. Okay, so now the bottom row is the complex this, and the upper part coincides with the double complex, and projective modules are direct sum under free module and hence flat, and therefore you have these two, that all rows are exact at positions with column index q greater than 0. That's all right. And all columns are exact. That is also not a problem, because you have all through these projective modules. So now the complex homomorphism induces the homomorphisms at this level, right? So you have, these are the complex homomorphisms, don't forget. And this is the double complex. You remember we had that shorthand of double, that direct sum, okay? So you know that induces a map at the level of homology, fair enough. Now, what do you want to show? You want to show, don't forget the proof statement. I have to be a little more expert with this. Yeah, this is the statement you are trying to show, that working with the double complex or working with the individual one, once with respect to M, once with respect to E, all you will have isomorphisms from here to here, here to here, and so on. Okay. So that Tor can be defined using any argument or even using the double complex. That's the idea. Okay, so now what we do is the following. Here you are. Yeah, so sigma is an isomorphism you want to show. Okay, so to show that first is on to, now, yeah, I mean, this actually will be helpful if I can open, just a minute, let me try. No harm in trying. Yes. Not bad. Okay, so you are here. You are. JKV, are you here? So JKV was asking, we were discussing once that you can open the same file in two windows like this. Okay, so anyway, here you are. Oh no, not this. No. This is not the one which I wanted to open. No, no. No, it's not working. It's still probably I just have to open one file and then open in a new window. Anyway, let's forget it. Okay, so this is your double one. So just keep in mind. Okay, so these are the levels. So these are the levels. This is the level of M, then M naught, then M1, then M2, and so on. Okay, and here the E's are, so basically rows are by the M's and the columns are by the E's. Just remember this much. Okay, because okay, so here you are. So you want to show that sigma is an isomorphism. So first on to, so we will start with this M tensor E star. So you see this is the bottom row. Okay, this is from the bottom row, I mean the homology, in the homology of the at the bottom row level. Okay, and then choose a representative. Now idea is, I'll tell you what the idea is. So basically you have to, at each stage you have to go up. But the only challenge is you do not know, you can see this, right? So you do not know, so you basically want to choose you want to find a pre-image, but pre-image where you basically have to come up at each stage, okay? Because your isomorphism is from the double complex, homology of the double complex to that of the this bottom row, okay? So what you, so therefore, now I start with an element which is a cycle, and then we want to construct an element in this, okay, which is a pre-image of this. Okay, so here you have it. Here you have a representative, but you want a representative here. That is the challenge. So this is the cycle of the bottom complex, but this is in the double complex. How you do that? So basically what you will be doing is you will be kind of going through a kind of a ladder kind of thing. Okay. So what you do is you choose an element, you choose a pre-image, but it is not guaranteed to belong to Z of M0 E star. Okay, because you do not know whether X belongs to Z of Zn of M0 E star. You know that it is an M E star. And then what you do is every time you will find an element here such that this is true. The why? Because of the kernel condition, because it is a cycle. And then again, this is possible because this implies that the image under this is contained in this. Once again, you have the exactness out here, and then again you will choose an element here such that this is true, which is again the kernel condition, and so on. Now, so basically you have to every time, and you have to go up only when you know that it is not in the kernel. So you have to find a proper element in the kernel of the double complex. That's what. And then you have to come down through the stairs. That's the idea. Okay, so this process ends. Now this is very important, that this process ends with some element here, and we see that by our construction, this sum, okay, you can understand here the first index is actually going increasing up to n, and the second index is gradually decreasing to 0. Okay, and if you, what did I say? I said that the first is through these m's and the second is through these e's. Okay, and then you will be able to show that it will eventually belong to a kernel. I mean, it will be a cycle. So, and now if you just apply the d's, you will see that it will eventually give you your if you apply the d's, you will see that it will be 0, and it will be able to show that it will actually come down to your element at the bottom level. Now this verification is what you just do it once, you just write it once, because otherwise these things will make no sense. But this is a very, very nice technique, and typically if you have to do it, if whenever you are handling a double complex, then there's only one way you do it, that every time starting with the bottom row, then you gradually go up, and when you go up, and then finally what you have to ensure is that yes, you finally have an element, okay, and then you come down, it stops. Okay, and obviously Yeah, it is clear that why you have this, because your double complex is basically empty tensor EQs. Okay. And so each time you are raising one, each time you are basically raising one M and reducing one E. Okay, because just, yeah, here you can see. So raising the one M level means going up like this. If you go move horizontally, you basically, you don't increase M. You don't increase this index. So going up is increasing M. Okay. And going by, if you are, or rather going down is decreasing M index, and going to the left is decreasing E, and going to the right is increasing E. So if you want to increase the, so if I, yeah, this is where I need both the pages to be open. So if you can see that since I'm increasing the M index and decreasing corresponding E index, so basically what you will be doing is like you are increasing the M index means you are coming here, and then decreasing the index means you are coming here, and eventually you are, so basically you are going like this, and eventually you are coming here. So that the left end where you have the exactness. Okay, so it's going like this every time. This, and so on. So this is the chasing the double complex thing. And if you just write it for one of these, and then you will be able to see that exactly how many steps you require to come to a proper pre-image of an element in the kernel. Okay, so this is the proof for the onto-ness. And similarly, if you want to show the injectivity, it's kind of similar, that, but it is simpler, that if you start with an element in the which is a cycle in the double complex, and then what you do is you basically you want to show, suppose this xpq is this whose image is belongs to the, it's a boundary, and then it's kind of, if you just follow the maps, etc., then you will be able to see that you have your you have the injectivity, that it is coming to zero means it has to be the zero element. Okay, so please just go through this once, and if necessary we can take it up for discussion again. But the main idea is exactly what I've said, that if you have it here, if you have the picture here, then every time you basically chase it like this. Okay, so you are increasing the N's and decreasing the E's. Suppose you have started here, then you are basically going up like this. Okay, and eventually you have your element. And when you have the element, then you show that, basically you show that that is unique, right? So you will be able to see that if you are pushing that to zero, then it has to be zero for every element. Okay, so now another, this is just a quick remark at the end, that spectral sequence argument is the another argument which is which kind of is often used, but that kind of blurs the picture. But here it is absolutely clear, like how do you do a diagram chasing with a double complex. Okay, now this before I come to this, so therefore let me again go back. Yeah, so have we answered both? We have answered this. For this, what would you do? For this isomorphism, can somebody answer? For this? We have answered this one. I'm asking for this also, do we have to do it separately, or what should we do? Here is your picture, in fact. Well, not quite. I do not have the M out here.
We just have to look it in the other way. Means
Sorry?
the rows should be M0
Mhm.
and the column should be E. So in that,
Turn it upside down. But remember, there is one challenge. Please don't forget that. See here, this left, here you are ending with this zero here. Okay, it's an arrow in this direction, please don't forget. Okay, because you do not have, you only have the right exactness, right? So here this is very, very important, because what did I say? I said that you will be chasing like this, no, and finally you will have an element because you have the surjectivity, etc. So
Okay.
now my question is, if you just simply, so so if are you saying that I'll just turn it like this?
Um, yeah, I want to say that in here we have rows to be E0s, means E's,
Actually,
and
just a minute. Actually, honestly, just a minute. Let me take you to the correct picture. So, yeah, yeah. This is actually the correct picture, because here at least you see M here, right?
Mhm.
Here I was just showing you the double complex.
Okay, okay,
Very
okay.
important.
Sorry,
This
sorry.
augmentation is very important, right?
Okay,
So,
okay,
yeah.
okay.
Now is it clear?
Yes, yes.
So what you do is basically you flip the roles of M and D, nothing much. Okay. So instead of once you have done it for E, so here this E0, E1, E2, etc. If you write it, you will, I mean, in some sense, you will be writing something here, right? Because these are the E's, all sort of, I mean, they are kind of subjecting onto E, the projective resolutions. Then you tensor with all these, first you M and then with the MIs. Okay. So yes, in some sense you are just turning it upside down, but be a little careful that you need this zero out here, because this will be the diagram chasing. That is something
Okay.
that you have to remember. So basically this position does not really matter, but as I have said already, that in diagram chasing, often it is very tempting to hand wave, but that kind of leads to a lot of errors. So one has to be a little careful. So I have only given you this, and maybe you just yourself verify that what if you take M star and E here, how your that picture will change. That's it. That's the only thing that I wanted to point out. Okay, and please go through these verification ones, that the idea I have said. So it is like chasing the ladder, because you have the zero out here, or rather, I mean, you know what with zero I mean, that subjectivity zero. And every time you have to ensure the pre-image is there. And finally, you have to say that, yes, that sum is actually, you have come to an end. That is that last stage, and then you take the sum of those elements, take the sum of these elements, and finally you have your desired element, which is a cycle in the double complex. This is very important. Okay, so now we are kind of finally, which I have been saying for many days, that we are going to connect and
Hello, sir.
some very important things. Yes, please.
Oh, sir, the last proposition, does it actually shows that the in Tor Mn, right? M and N can be interchanged.
Yeah, yeah, of course. That's what you have showed, right? Because
Yes.
it doesn't matter whether you take projective resolution of M or N.
Okay.
Okay.
No, no, I mean, does it actually shows that Tor Mn is equals to actually Tor Nm?
Yeah, you have actually proved how you define Tor. Tor is the nth homology, isn't it? Tor is defined to be the nth homology, and you are saying that you have. It's very difficult to remember all the time. Just a minute. Yeah, see, this Torin ME can be defined using any one of the above homology modules, right? Because you have this isomorphism of complexes, etc., and isomorphism at the nth homology levels. So Tor is the same, means what? The homology modules are isomorphic,
Yes.
isn't it so? So
Yeah.
therefore, your flipping is not going to change.
Sure.
Just go through it a little meticulously. I mean, this is a problem with this thing, that Blackboard teaching that way, you can keep some portion. Here also, I believe one can do. See here what you are doing is, this double complex is basically absorbing the individualities of M and N in some sense, isn't it so? So therefore, whether you are doing it with respect to E on the left or M on the left, doesn't matter, because double complex is not going to change.
Yes.
Fair enough? Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, so finally we are here, and we will quickly wrap it up now. That we said that the store criteria, the flatness criteria, we would like to see it in terms of these functors, these derived functors. So Mn are modules, and assume that one of them is projective or flat, then you have this is 0. Well, this actually you can easily prove, but there is a caveat here. That is why I thought that one should spend some time. See, we have seen that f is a covariant additive functor with the left derived functors fn, okay, on the category of R modules, and then f and m is 0 if f is m is projective and f is right exact with f0 equal to f. This we have already discussed, okay, the general scenario that doesn't matter which functor you are working with, as long as you have covariant functor, then you can, and therefore you can define the left derived functors, and then projectivity ensures, projectivity of m ensures that these are all 0 and the 0th one is f. That is done. Okay, now how did we do that? You just start with this projective module, and then you can have the obvious resolution, and then the correspondence between the complexes going to the, and then you apply the functor. It still gives you the homotopy. Then it gives you the homotopy it gives you the isomorphism at the homology levels. And if one of them is just the trivial one, then obviously the homologies will be 0, and therefore. Okay, so more generally, if n is flat, then given a projective resolution m star to m, we see that this is still a homological resolution of m star tensor n, and we get this is 0. So this is essentially what Joydeep was that day using. Okay, so because here see what if you remember what was the discussion. The discussion was, do we not then require projective resolutions at all? Well, you may say so only after you prove this, but that is not quite true. If you want to define the left derived functor, you have to take help of some resolution. Now, if you want to replace it by any homological resolution in general, but then you would require a kind of isomorphism. That what it is being said is that if you have n is flat, then given any projective resolution, we see that this is still, this m star tensor n is still a homological resolution. That is of course true, right? Because n is flat. When you tensor, you have all exactness, blah, blah, blah. That's not the problem. Point is now when you are using this, how do you get this finally then? How do you get this finally then? I do not have the projectivity here. I do not have projective property here anywhere. I have a more general thing. I have the flatness. So how do you get this? Okay, so this requires a proof. Now, once again, I just I said it's a caveat, because these kind of hand waving often lead to very serious errors. So one has to be a little careful. Here, this please, I have put it under E stroke T, because I believe this is going to be taken up in the tutorial. If not, then in one of the meetings which we said that we would have for discussing the lecture notes part. Okay, so but please think about it, that I'm saying that we want to prove this part, that if you have flat, if you have m or n, okay, if one of them is flat, then also you have this. So how do you prove this finally? That is exactly what I'm trying to discuss, that if you start with a projective resolution of m and take a flat n module n, then you still have a homological resolution. Now you do not have a projective resolution in general, right? Now, how do you suddenly jump to this conclusion? So obviously you have to show some isomorphism between at the homology level. But how? So therefore, that diagram chasing is what you require. And that is what that day we were discussing, that you will have two rows, and then you have to one place you have the projective criteria by which you will get 0. Another place you do not have projective, but by diagram chasing, you will be able to show the isomorphism at the level of complexes. That's exactly what is important here. Okay, so please pay attention to this. Okay, now this comes to this proposition that we have this equivalence, that flat TOR1 is 0 for all our modules n, TOR1 is 0 for all finite type. Finite type, we mean finitely generated for modules. And then TOR1 is 0 for all these kind of cyclic R modules that are mod A for ideals A. Okay. So now this is very important because here you are saying that basically the vanishing of the first TOR module gives you flatness. But what is more important here is that if you remember in my first lecture, we were discussing something like this. And one of you in fact asked me a question that how far you can generalize this finite generation. If some condition is true for finitely generated modules. I said that we will have a fairly generalized one, but using TOR. So here you are. So how do you, now here what we are going to learn is that how do you actually handle this finitely generated condition as opposed to general R module? I do not have any restriction on the ring. Okay. So 1, 2, these parts are easy. I hope these are easy. 1, 2, 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. Can you just quickly have a look and confirm? Then we will have 4 to 3 and then 3 to 1. So 1 implies 2 implies 3 implies 4, we can assume. Okay. This is what we just now said, that flatness, if you have one of them is flat or projective, you have 0. So that takes care of it. This is true for all and then for all finitely generated. And for all finitely generated, therefore also for this. That much is true. Now we are trying to go back from 4 implies 3. Okay, so this is here something very, very interesting. You have seen this already in some form. Now again, you are revisiting it, but you are in the terms of vanishing of TOR. So you have a finitely generated R module generated, let us say, by S elements, and proof is by induction on S. Okay, so assume that TOR1 of Mn is 0. So first we do it for S equal to 1. So this is the generating set, X generates N, suppose. Then you have this map, this is onto, and the kernel gives an ideal A such that N is isomorphic to R mod A. And you know, we have already assumed that since you have an isomorphism here, and therefore you have this is 0, and A is finitely generated. Because here is your condition is on for finitely generated ideals, right? So this is what is to be noticed. Now, since you here, therefore, if you can ensure that this kernel is actually finitely generated, then you are done. Okay, then you are done. So now, if it is not, then how do you manage? So here again, you are, this is the major problem. So now you see how typically these arguments are carried out. Every time you kind of appeal to the long exact TOR sequence. That's it. There is no other shorthand. So we consider the long exact TOR sequence, and then you get it here. So I hope it is clear to you how you get it. So basically what you do is you take A content in R and tensor by M. So you have an M out here, and then the TORs come. Okay, so you have TOR of R mod A. So here what you are doing is A, R mod A, right? Okay, so and therefore you have this to be, this is R module is this is free, and you have just now said that if you have projective or flat, you have 0. So you have 0 here, therefore you have a 0 here, and therefore you have an isomorphism. So therefore the kernel, you have this, so therefore you have an isomorphism between the kernel of this map, okay, and this TOR. So for every finitely generated ideals A dash content in A, then the composition of the canonical maps is injective. Can somebody tell me what exactly is being said here? Why is this true? So please remember what we are trying to do. We are trying to prove 4 implies 3. I have the assumption only for those R mods A for which A is finitely generated ideal. And I want to prove that TOR1 of Mn is 0 for all finitely generated modules N. Okay, so you start with a finitely generated module. In fact, we are proving it by induction. So that means we are assuming first that it is one generated. We have this surjection, canonical surjection, and then the kernel is A, but A need not be finitely generated. That's the whole idea. Now, how do you resolve this? You will basically, you will work with this A, you will take the long exact Tor sequence that you are getting by tensoring. If you take this R mod A, and then you will get tensoring by M, this gives you this, and you know this is 0. So therefore you have the kernel. Now what I'm saying is, if you take any finitely generated ideal contained in A is that kernel, then you have this map, this composition of these canonical maps is injective. Why? Why should that be true?
Yes, because for finitely generated ideals, we have Tor1 of M R mod is 0. So here should be 0. I mean,
What should be?
if we take the
That is,
corresponding sort exec sequence and
which
compute
sort
Tors.
exec sequence will you take? Because here it will be 0 with respect to R mod A dash then, right?
Yes, yes.
So how is that featuring out? I mean, how is that featuring here? How will you? See,
I
at least
mean,
here I don't see that. So where will that come from suddenly?
yeah, I mean, if I take the sort exec sequence A dash to R to R mod A dash, then compute Tor. I mean,
Okay, so
the long exec sequence.
yeah. So which one are you saying? Are you saying that this map is injective and this map is
No,
injective?
no, no. The composition.
The composition, yes,
Yes.
but how does Tor1 come here? Okay, so we will see this, because see these are the small points which I'm just sort of trying to sort of highlight, where you should be a little careful, because this is there's you will see a pattern in these kind of arguments. Yeah, you are correct, but still a little more has to be said. So here you are. So basically we have this is 0 by 4. Okay. Now, now what we will do is, my question was, this is 0, but where does it feature? This is 0, but where does it feature? Why suddenly should Tor1? I don't see Tor1 of M R mod A dash here, right? Now I have taken a finitely generated sub ideal which is contained in the ideal A. Okay, and then the composition is injective. So where does Tor1 of M R mod A dash feature exactly? How will I use that Tor? Can you suggest me some long exact sequence where that will appear? And then I will be having a 0 here, and then the composition will be injective, because the kernel will be Tor1 of M R mod A dash. That is what my question is exactly.
Hello.
Yes.
Because Tor1 of R mod A dash will imply that A dash is a flat module, and we have a injective map from A dash to A. Will it work, sir?
No.
Take A dash to R modulo A dash, sort exact sequence. So this will give a long exact sequence of formula.
I missed that first part. Say it again, Sampath.
Like it take a sort exact sequence from A dash to R modulo A dash.
Just a minute. Just a minute. Let me say it.
Take a sort exact sequence like 0 to A dash to R modulo A dash.
R mod A
0,
dash.
no, 0 to A dash to R modulo A dash.
The usual map.
Yeah, and then like this will give a long exact sequence of homologies.
When you tensor with M.
You permit tensor with them. So like we'll get a map from
So you will get
Tor1.
something like this here. Is instead of A, you will have A dash.
Yes.
Okay. Now.
So like we will get a map from Tor1 M R modulo A dash to Tor1.
Just a minute. Just a minute. R M R mod
M
dash.
R modulo A dash to Tor. This is like then A dash tensor M. This will A dash tensor M. Tor 0 will be A dash tensor M.
No, what will be the element after that? What will be the module after this?
This will be A dash tensor M.
Here,
Yes.
that is the 0. That
Yes.
is Tor 0. Good. Now
To
the
M.
of these things, right?
Yeah, and since this is 0, therefore this will be injective.
Absolutely. So what he is trying to say is that you basically do the same thing, but no, but still you are still missing one small point. Where is exactly this factoring through A? Where that is taking place here? So that I can do because I have this map. I could have taken just A dash, right? So why do I need to kind of bring this A into picture? This is my point. See, separately for A dash you can do, that is clear. That is because of this, that you have the isomorphism in this level. Okay, so here instead of A, if you have an A dash, then it will be 0, that is by 4. And therefore you have this kernel is 0 and therefore you have the injectivity, correct? But point is, so here to here, why do I need to bring this chap into the middle? Why this factoring through M tensor A has to be taken? Are you able to follow my question? What I'm asking is, here if we replace A by A dash, then this is true, then this is true. And by assumption 4, by hypothesis 4, this is 0. Therefore, the kernel is 0. Therefore, this map is injective. I could have said it straight away, no? M tensor A dash to M is injective. But why did I say that this composition is injective? So is it true that this map always factors through this? And also this is number one, question number one. Question number two, why do I have to bring this into picture? This argument is correct, what you have said. Yeah.
Like every element of this can be written as a like finite sum of Mi tensor AIs.
So absolutely. So basically what we need to do, so let me now take you to the next slide, you will understand. So basically once you have, see, this is being used as Sampath has correctly said. Now, if you take an element in the kernel of this, okay, and if you take, suppose, so basically what you do is, since it will be written as a finite sum, and A dash, which A dash will you choose? You will take this A dash, which is generated by these A1, A2 ARs, and therefore you have this. Now you are just sort of using another letter to denote it. It's the same chap, but you want to see it inside this, okay, which is a preimage of this Z, and therefore belongs to the kernel of this map. Okay, so basically this whole thing is that since you do not have a finitely generated ideal to begin with, but you want to show that you have the injectivity, okay, so basically you start with an element and you somehow find a kind of, you have another module and a map from that module such that the image of this is here, this Z dash is mapping to Z, and here you have the finitely generated condition. See, I cannot just like that say that since I do not have the flatness out here, so I do not know, I mean, I do not straight away say that the injectivity at each level, right? So only thing is that I want to decide that how do I have, I mean, I only want to decide that what are the elements in the kernel. So I want a proper preimage out here, okay, and then because of the injectivity in totality, I know therefore that this will be 0, etc., etc. And here therefore you had to choose, and there's a reason why I'm kind of spending some time, because sometimes again there is a lot of hand waving and people kind of a little casual to say, now let us take a finitely generated ideal, now let us take a finitely generated submodule, but after tensoring I cannot ensure that it is sitting inside. So therefore I have to be a little careful. I have to actually just find a suitable preimage, and finitely generated actually gives me the condition that this toad is 0 and therefore I will be able to say that here, you see, the preimage of Z and therefore belongs to the kernel of this map, but then it must be Z dash equal to 0. So therefore, once you know this is 0, and therefore the element here is mapped onto this, and therefore this is 0. Okay, so therefore you have this injectivity, and you see that Tor of Rmn is Tor of M R mod A is 0, and etc. etc. So this takes care of the first case, that is when S is equal to 1, and then we will do it. We have to still carry out the induction process. So the whole idea is, when you are taking an element here and you write it as summation whatever this xi mi tensor ai, but suddenly you cannot just like that, suddenly you cannot just like that say that let us now take a finitely generated ideal. Well, yes, but point is you still have to argue, because you do not know that it is actually injecting inside this, but this whole map is actually injective. Okay, that follows because of the Tor argument, and therefore you have that this preimage Z dash is actually going to Z, and since this is 0, therefore this is 0, etc. etc. Okay, so this is a part which you should be very, very careful about, because otherwise you have a chance to go wrong. Now, how do you handle the generalized case? So what you do is, this is fairly simple. What you do is you kind of take this submodule n dash generated by the first s minus one of them, and then you have this where n dash is basically n mod n dash. You have this short exact sequence. Okay. And this is, but what the advantage of taking this is that here you have a cyclic condition. It will be generated by just excess, and then again you apply that long exact Tor sequence. Okay, so what you have is you have m n dash and m n double dash. By induction hypothesis they will be 0, right? And therefore, because they are with fewer generated by fewer elements, and therefore there's 0, and therefore in this long exact Tor sequence you have the Tor is vanishing. So this is a beautiful technique, that you start with a finitely generated assumption and then you prove it in general. So basically here, so this was our, but it's only still an intermediate step. We have not yet gone here. We have only reached here. So you start with this cyclic condition and then go to the finitely generated one. And now from finitely generated, we will remove that finitely generated part. So now that is something which is, again, it is very, very important, and you will learn a technique. So this is 3 implies 1. So remember, we have the Tor vanishing of Tor 1 for only finitely generated modules, that is finite type modules, and then we are going to assume to prove that M is flat. Okay, so we'll start with an injective homomorphism of R modules and consider the associated exact sequence, where again you can understand what this is. This is just the again something like the kernel co-kernel thing. And in order to see that M is flat, we have to show that this map is injective. Okay, okay, so again, you have only the assumption on finitely generated. How do you remove that? So let us assume that n is finitely generated, then n double dash. What is n double dash? N double dash is n quotient n dash. So that is also finitely generated, and therefore you have the vanishing of Tor 1. Apply the long exact Tor sequence. Remember, what does it do? Always Tor is just a simple left-derived functor, right? So it is coming as Tor 1 in the same order, that Tor 1 of mn double dash, then mn, then mn dash, and then Tor 2, and so on, right? So you have 0 here. Okay, so therefore you have this sequence is exact. Fine. So basically, so in particular, this m tensor n dash to m tensor n, please remember this was my n dash. Okay, so m tensor n dash to m tensor n, this is injective. And if n is not, so this was under the assumption that n is finitely generated. Okay, okay, so maybe I should underline it. Okay, so this was the assumption, and you have proved it. Now you are going to take away this assumption. You need to just do it over an arbitrary R module. Okay, so now If n is not finitely generated, now fix an element, same kind of argument here. So basically you want to show that some element in the kernel is 0. So basically you will be starting with an element there. It will only involve finitely many of them, and you will have to involve another submodule. Okay, so basically you start with an element here, and then n dash is the submodule generated by, so fix an element here in the kernel of this. Okay, now we may replace n dash by the submodule generated by n1, n2, nr. Can somebody tell me what is the reason that I can replace n dash by the submodule generated by this? Have we already discussed anything of this sort before? If you
These are the only things occurring in the expression of Z. So we'll basically we want to prove Z equal to 0. So these are the NIs are the only things which are occurring in the expression of Z.
Okay, but is it typically an element? How do I see? So therefore, I'm not working with my old n dash anymore, right? Am I saying that I still have a submodule of that original one? You remember what you understand what my question is? So m tensor n dash is here, and I want to show that m tensor n dash some element, if it is going to 0, then it is actually 0. I want to show the injectivity. So what I'm saying is I do not know a priori whether it is finitely generated. So I'm taking an element and replacing that n dash by a finitely generated module. So then have I not changed my n dash? Yes, you are correct that you basically those elements only matter. But am I trying to say that I am still working inside a submodule of m tensor n dash? Is it that can we be like so casual in saying that I replace n dash all through? See, because if that was the case, then I could have done something similar here, right? Just take some elements and take a finitely generated ideal. Then why did you have to say that the composition is actually injective, a one-one map and so on? Okay, so here, yes, it is only involving finitely many, but should I not be a little more careful? Can we say safely that if I take, let me call it something, n dash tilde. N dash tilde is a submodule generated by this finitely many n1, n2, nr. Okay, and that is sitting inside n dash, fair enough. But I do not know that after tensoring whether it is contained, right? Or do I know? If you remember, I believe this was the first lecture or maybe the beginning of second lecture, where I raised a question, probably the first lecture itself, where we were quickly discussing the tensor product, etc. So there, this was discussed that when you are taking that some element is 0, you can actually choose a submodule where it is staying, right? But I said that one proof is that we can use the construction. And I've had a question. Can we actually give a proof without using the construction of tensor product? Okay, so now I'm coming back to that question. I promised you that I will come back to this. So now here it is. Can you altogether forget the construction of tensor product? It's still debatable. So here one proof is, maybe I should take you to that slide once, just a minute. So lecture 4, yeah, so maybe it is, oops. Just a minute, sorry for that. So lecture 1 maybe. Here it is. Yes. No. Yeah. So this was the question. Can you give an example of a situation where you need the explicit construction of the tensor product? Okay. And this was the discussion that then let M and NR be R modules, then every element can be written as this, where Xi belong to M and Yi and N. That is all right. That we have proved. And there we basically use the universal property and so on. And then I'm missing that place. No, sorry, what? Here it is. Here it is. Yes. Here is the lemma. If you have two R modules and if you have this equal to 0 for some elements xi in M and y in N and a finite index set I, so then there exist finitely generated submodules M dash of M and N dash of N such that this xi belongs to M dash yi and N dash, and this is actually 0 considered as an element of M dash tensor N dash. But there was the question, is M dash tensor N dash necessarily a submodule of M tensor N? This was an issue. Okay. So the discussion, if you see here, we have used the construction of tensor product to prove it. Okay. So question was, is it necessary to use the construction of the tensor product? Fine. So basically, this zero condition on the element, you can actually replace M tensor N by M dash tensor N dash such that M dash and N dash are finitely generated. Up to this is fine. But point is, you have no guarantee that this is sitting inside. That is the major problem. Okay. And my question was whether this proof can be replaced by a proof which is, kind of just uses the canonical maps and things like that. So this was the major question that I had. And we are now back to this, that we are now using it consciously. So let me go back. I've gone to the, oh no, I didn't want to come here yet. Just a minute. So I was where? Lecture 4.2. Yeah. So now we are here. Yes. So we are basically replacing this by 3 implies 1. So we are replacing N dash by a submodule generated by N1 into NR. Up to this is fine. Moreover, we know that there is a finitely generated submodule N dash. So again, let me underline it. Such that the image of Z is trivial in M tensor N dash. Thus, Z belongs to the kernel of this map. Okay. Fine. And it follows from the special case that Z is equal to 0. Okay. So therefore, so just my question is very simple, that is it okay that what I am doing, I am taking this finitely many, these NIs, I am choosing a submodule, I am replacing it by finitely generated, and I am using the hypothesis that Tor1 of, so therefore this map is injective and thus, so therefore this map is injective, and therefore because I have the hypothesis on the finitely generated ones, and hence M is flat. So basically argument is similar. But is it fine? Are you okay with the argument, or is there some problem? Are we using the fact that something is a submodule of something?
So actually, I think we are actually going back to the definition of tensor product. Otherwise, how could we say that?
The definition of tensor product means? Which one do you call it?
Means the construction the construction of tensor product. Sorry, huh?
So
So
that this opens up a debate basically. So that proof of that fact that M tensor n, when you have summation x, whatever I wrote, no, mi tensor n I think is 0, and whether, yeah, I think I have it here. Yeah. So proof of that fact that whenever I have this mi tensor ni is xi tensor yi is 0, and then that is actually happening in a finitely generated submodule. Whether I can prove it without using the construction, this still is open for discussion. So can somebody give me a proof without using the definition of construction of tensor product? Now, interesting enough, I have seen it written. People are saying that you can use this. Let me show you. Let me show you here. So you can use this corollary to prove it. But you see, this corollary heavily depends on this result. I mean, the corollary uses this theorem or proposition, whatever I am calling it. So it would be circular. So that doesn't make sense. Okay. The statement is, the corollary is the following: an R module M is flat if and only for every finitely generated ideal A, the canonical map A tensor M to N is injective. Okay. Now, using this is out of question. At least if then you have to prove this corollary separately. That's a different thing. If you prove it separately, maybe yes. But otherwise, still, I would love to know if you can give me a proof of, so what, a proof of what? Proof of this, that I'm taking M tensor n, M and N are R modules. Okay. I have x1, x2, xr elements in M and y1, y2, yr elements in N, such that summation xi tensor yi is 0 in M tensor n, then I can choose finitely generated submodules M dash and N dash of M and N respectively, such that this element is 0 is actually happening in M dash tensor N dash. Okay, so this, I want a proof of this fact, if possible, without using the construction of tensor products. Fine. So this is actually an interesting part. Just think about it once, that the proof is fine. There's no problem with the proof. These kind of arguments are always almost straightforward. So what you do is the following. You have an element here in the tensor product. That element is summation mi tensor ni. That element is here. Okay. Oops. Is a problem. Yeah. So that element is here. You want to show that it is 0. Now it is 0 if you want to show, basically you want to use some injectivity of some map. So what are you doing? You do not actually need a proper submodule. All you need is, so you have something, suppose M tensor n, and you have M not n, n suppose n dash, and if you can have an M tensor n tilde, and if you can give a map from here to here, that is enough. And if you can show that you have a z dash here which is getting mapped to z, okay, and if you have a 0 condition on the kernel of this, if this is 0, and then that is enough. Then what you have is basically, therefore this is 0 because of the kernel 0 condition, therefore this would get mapped to 0, and you are done. Just like we have done it here, just like we have done it in this case. Where was it? Here. Okay, so you do not actually need that one is sitting inside. That is the first important point. All you need is that if you can show that there is some, if you can give a map, and then you show that some kernel is becoming 0 and the composition map is becoming injective. How? So in the sense that you have an element here, so that element is 0 and that element is getting mapped to this element. And here, for when you have started with this element that was of this form, you have chosen the finitely generated submodule of n dash. You do not need, this should be sitting inside. All you need is, you need a map from here to, you just need a map from here to here. That's it. Okay, then you know that if you have 0 condition on this, this will get mapped to 0 and you are done. So you do not really need that it is actually sitting inside this or anything of that sort. So that you can easily do it using, there are various ways to do it. And you have Tor 0, etc. You have just now seen, we have done it for the ideals. We are now doing it for the modules in general. Okay. But question is, can you say that you are actually having two submodules which are finitely generated? And is it possible to prove that fact without using the construction? So keep that in mind. That was the question in that lecture one. This thing. Okay, so let me proceed now. Okay, so this corollary is basically again the same kind of argument that if you have flatness, and then it is if and only for every finitely generated ideal A of R, the canonical map is injective. Once again, you can see this finitely generated condition, but now you know what to do, because if you can show that M tensor R mod A, if you can show TOR1 is 0, then you are done, because you have proved a big proposition. So M is a flat R module, then this is injective. That is obvious, because you take this injectivity and then tensor it by M. Flatness takes care of left exactness. And conversely, if you have injectivity here, for every finitely generated ideal A, now consider this short exact sequence you have seen just now. In fact, when Sampath was also giving the argument, it is basically the same thing. And then you tensor by M, okay? You will have TORs coming out here, and then vanishing of TOR will take care of the exactness basically. Okay, so same argument. The argument is, I told you, right, there's a pattern. So you basically have tensored with M, and then the TORs have come here. You have the 0 condition here for finitely generatedness. You have that 0 here because you have R is free. So automatically, therefore, this is injective, okay? And we must have, therefore, this is 0. And however, the latter is satisfied for all finitely generated ideas, then by the previous proposition, M is flat. So these are the arguments, but please remember a couple of things. One is that you always use the long exact TOR sequence. Another is that whenever you are going from a finitely generated to general case, then you show that something is in the kernel and that is 0. Now, how you do it is that element in the kernel, starting with its finite expression, you come down to a finitely generated module. You do not necessarily need that you need a submodule. You only need a map from that finitely generated one to the original one where you want to show the 0 condition. Okay, so that these are the couple of things you need to remember. I'm running late. Let me just quickly rush through it. So another quick proposition that for an R module M double dash, these following statements are equivalent. That flat, and then for every short exact sequence and for every R module N, the tensorized sequence is flat. So basically you have the flatness out here at the right tail, okay? So this proof is also, I mean, these are kind of, they're not difficult. Again, you will be only using that TOR1 is vanishing. Okay, so you can see, I mean, let me just quickly talk about it. So you just tensor, you here it comes as your TOR1, and you have this is 0 because M double dash is flat, and therefore you have the exactness out here. And similarly, if you have started with this such that M is okay, yeah, here something is important, that here this is your condition, that if you have the tensorite condition is 0, tensorized sequence is 0 for every R module N, then you have M double dash must be flat, right? So here what you start with is, you can actually safely start with a situation where you have M is free, right? This we can do. Can we do this? Can we start with a sequence like this where M is free? And then tensor by N?
Take the settable generators of M double prime.
Basically the free R module on the generating set of M double dash, and then you take kernel, etc., right? Yeah. And then again, you just long exact TOR sequence, and then you have the zeroness because of the free module, and therefore you have, you can understand the similarity in the argument, right? It's kind of, once you have a 0 here and you have the exactness out here, and therefore M double dash is flat, etc., etc. Okay, and yeah. So this similarly, if you have a short exact sequence of R modules and the tail is flat, then M dash is flat if and only if M is flat. So same kind of argument. Once again, you basically what you do is you use TOR1 is 0. That's it. So you come to the for an R module N, you take the long exact TOR sequence, and you have the vanishing because M double dash is flat. Remember, the Tod does not change the order, right? You always have Tod 1 of M double dash n, then M n, then M dash n, then comes Tod 2. So you have this 0, and therefore you have the isomorphism at this level. Therefore, this is 0 if and only if this is 0. Therefore, 1 is flat. Yeah. So that's it. Yes, please.
Sir, in that case, can we say in general that Tod1 Mn isomorphic to Tod1 M prime n whenever we have an XX sequence like this?
You are using flatness of M double dash.
Yeah.
Of course.
Because both the sides will be 0 every time.
Of course. Basically, that is what you are saying.
Yeah.
It's proof ends here, really. Okay, I'm I'll just take a couple of minutes and quickly introduce, since this took a lot of time, allow me, just quickly let me tell you, and then I'll stop that. This is just the dual thing. Okay, so basically the kind of thing what we have done, you kind of reverse the arrows and then you are there. Okay, but that is loosely speaking, of course. So injective resolution is first of all, here you have the projective, and the injective is just the dual picture of it. So projective was this, that P is projective if for every onto map, this from E to E double dash, you have that this is onto the associated map with the home level. And injective is you just reverse the arrows. Okay. So for every injective map, you have the associated map is onto. Okay. And how now home is a little more, it's a kind of a curious object, because see, it will raise quite a few questions. Let me just quickly tell you a few things, and then we can continue in the next lecture. So first of all, you know that this is, you have a covariant additive functor here if you are doing it with respect to, if you have fixed the first part. On the other hand, if you have fixed the this part, so then you have a contravariant additive functor. Okay, so now when we are coming to the derived functor, there you will have the both the natures. That's the trouble. That's the only trouble. But trouble in the sense that the same proof would work through, but you have to be a little careful. So what you do out here is that how you define the derived functor here. So I'll just say that and stop. So you know, this is you have the left exactness for these functors. These are very easy to verify. Let me not. You should be able to check this. Only here what you do not have is the right exactness. So I will have the right derived functors. Okay. So the technique is the same. So you see how the injective modules are used. Okay. So basically what you are doing is that if you have an injection here, if you have a one-to-one map here, so what is injective module doing? You have then like once you have a one-to-one map here, so this is sitting as a submodule of this. And then with respect to an injective module, whenever you have the map from here to here, you can lift it to a map from here to here. So that's the idea, right? So maps from here to here, you can lift it to a map because E is the bigger one. Okay, so keeping that in mind, now you have a remark that P is projective if and only if this is exact, and I is injective if and only if this is exact. Okay, so that these are fairly simple stuff. Examples, it will be discussed actually, if not in the tutorial, I'll have a chance to add it. I'll tell you later. So let me quickly tell you. So what is a resolution? Just like a projective resolution, we can take a kind of, this is a resolution, you can see that. So basically it's a cochain. It's a cochain instead of a chain. Okay. And you will do the same thing, that you will start with the cochain complex, you will take the trivial one, and then you will treat them as complexes, then the equivalence of the complexes giving rise to homotopy and so on and so forth. That is what we will be doing. Okay. Now, yeah. So now here you are. So you will, this kind of, if it is exact, and each MI is an injective module, you call it an injective resolution. Okay. Now this is the proposition that every R module M admits an injective homological resolution. So it is so remember, for projective resolution we said homological, and here we are saying cohomological because it is just in the other direction, sort of the flip of that, a dual of that. And for every R module M, there exists an injective R module I, and an injective R module map M contained in I. Now this is pretty serious. This is actually easy. If you assume this lemma, what it is saying is that any R module M can be actually put inside an injective R module. Okay, this is, you would require some transfinite induction here, Zorn's lemma here, but here, now if you assume that, then it is easy to prove, because what you will do is you basically need this exact sequence, right? So you will start with this. You will first get an injective module which contains M, and then you will, every time you will just take this M0 mod M, and then you will put it inside another injective module. Then you will take M1 tensor M0 and put it inside in another injective module, and continue like this. So, and continue by embedding the co-kernel of each step into an injective module, and that will take care of the exactness and everything. Okay, so getting an injective resolution is fine. That's not a problem, provided you assume this lemma. So this lemma we will talk about in the next lecture. Let me not discuss this now. Proof of the lemma we will come to, but let me just tell you how finally what you do with this. Yeah, so if you start with the projective resolution, and if you apply the home, then you know left exactness is fine. And then you have this, it continues like this, right? You have the home sequence, okay? And you define, so you have first applied the functor on this resolution, you have come to a complex, and then you are taking the homology of the complexes, nth level or rather cohomology, because it's a co-chain complex, applying the home, you have flipped it over, and therefore you have a co-chain complex. From a chain complex, you have a co-chain complex, take the cohomologies, these are called the nth X modules. Okay, now, moment you have done that, a similar question would come. You should show that it is independent of the projective resolution that you have started with. So same kind of technique. If you take two projective resolutions, you know we have already proved that if I take two such complexes, then I will be able to define a homotopy. So let me read it out. Consider a second projective resolution, and we have proved that M star and M star dash are homotopy equivalent. And then you apply the functor. This transfers the equivalence, this homotopy equivalence into homotopy equivalence between these two complexes. Okay, and then basically either chain complex going to cochain complex, right? And then but once you have homotopy between complexes, that gives rise to equality at the level of homology modules. So basically, therefore, you need the homotopy equivalence definition for the cochains. You can understand the definition is going to be similar. Only thing is that, so this is a cochain complex. It is increasing in this direction, this n-1, n+1, and so on. So the homotopy maps, so basically these are the maps, F and G are two maps from here to here, okay? And then homotopy here, the homotopy between these two will be like it is coming from Cn to Dn-1. So basically it's of degree -1. Okay, for chain which was of degree +1, and here it is of degree -1 for the obvious reason you can understand, because it is on the other side of the it's on the right hand side, and therefore you have this and the condition is the same, that there these F minus G's should be this at each level. Okay, so but every other thing, instead of the what we had done for homology, what we had done for chain complex and homology, if you just sort of flip the arrows and take care, you will have the same version for the cochain complex and cohomologies. Okay, same arguments go through. Okay, and remember your home functor will, it actually this home of this, see home of this actually has flipped it. So home of that dot comma n, right? Remember? So you have, because of the contravariant nature. Okay, and then alternatively, now here comes the point. See, alternatively, we can take an injective resolution of n. Okay, so that is a cochain complex. I mean, that is exact, but on this side, right? So and consider the cohomology modules and define this as the X. Now you have two definitions, and one is with respect to a projective resolution of M of the first one, and another is with respect to the injective resolution of the second one. So what was really rather smooth for the tensor product, here you are actually handling, you are handling two spots and with two different kind of resolutions. So this is where you have to be a little careful. That's exactly what I was hinting at, that similar methods as above show that these modules are well defined. So here again, you can do the same thing. If you take two injective resolutions, and you will be able to show the homotopy equivalence between the cochain complexes, and finally apply this home, then again you have the homotopy equivalence, and then the derived functors level, I mean the homology level, there will be equality, and therefore, I mean the maps will be the same, etc., etc. So the well-definedness of this, so I'm calling it x dash, and the other one I'm calling it just x, okay, x. So both the definitions are well defined is fine, but now the question is, how do you show the isomorphism of these two? So this is where now it is very interesting actually, that, but again, a lot of tedious work, that basically same double complex technique. But remember, here one is the projective resolution and another is the injective resolution. Okay, so this is where you have to be a little careful, but essentially the same proof goes through. Okay, so this argument is basically a dual argument of what we have proved for chain complexes, and this would show that these are well defined. This is fine. A similar argument of double complex is used to compare between these two is what is really very, very important. And here you will have a picture like this. So here you can see that this is like what you have done is basically this was the projective resolution of M. So it was from this end, and then applying home has flipped it. It has come to this end. Okay, you have the 0 out here. So again, projective resolution of M and applied N dash. That means you have applied home dot N1, not N dash, N1. Then same here, right? And here, if you see, here you are taking the injective resolution of N, and then you applied home of M0. But because of the covariant nature, it has not disturbed these arrows. So this is the interesting, your grid is still intact, and the same proof of this steering going up the staircase is actually going to work. Okay, so the same kind of argument here. So what I have done is I have put them under E stroke T because they are essentially the same. So I didn't want to again kind of make it very lengthy. So I'll stop here today.